May 5th meeting of the Commission on the Future of Public Education in Vermont. I would kick us off. First, I apologize for not being there in person. I had a bit of a childcare issue that I needed to address, and I think a couple other folks are in the same boat. So thank you to those who are in person, and hopefully everyone feels like they can engage. So I will kick us off by doing a roll call so everyone knows who's here. And I'm going to start with the folks in the room. I can see 3 of you. So Mike, I'm going to pick on you to start.
Good afternoon, Mike Licklider. I'm the superintendent of the Harwood Unified Union School District, and I'm here as a representative of the Vermont Superintendents Association.
Jennifer, you can go. You guys can go and then pass it back to the screen.
All right. Hi, Jennifer Samuelson, Chair of the Vermont State Board of Education.
Jeff Fannin, Executive Director of Vermont NEA.
I think that's everyone in the room. Peter is on his way. I'll have him introduced when he gets here. I am Megan Roy. I'm chair of the commission here as a former member of the Act 173 advisory group. And I'll call on Rebecca. See you first.
Hi, Rebecca Samaroff, Deputy Commissioner of the Vermont Department of Taxes.
Zoe.
Good afternoon. I'm Zoe Saunders, Secretary of Education.
Elizabeth.
Elizabeth Jennings. I am the Director of Finance and Operations for Edison Northwest School District, here representing the Vermont Association of School Business Officials.
Jay. Oh, we can't hear you, Jay. No. Well, I will. This is Jay Nichols. He is the Executive Director of the Vermont Principals Association and here as their representative. I'm sure he will work on his audio so he can participate afterwards. John Castle, you're next.
Yep. Good afternoon, everybody. John Castle, Executive Director for the Vermont Rural Education Collaborative.
Oliver.
Oliver Olson. I'm the appointee of the Vermont Independent Schools Association.
Thank you. And I think that is everyone that's here at the moment.
Peter's got here.
Ah, perfect. I'll let Peter introduce himself.
Hi, everybody. Peter Conlon, appointee from the Vermont House, where I'm the chair of the House Education Committee.
Perfect. So I would like to welcome those who have joined us in Twin Valley and appreciate our hosts. I realize you're hosting a smaller group of us than is typical, but we still appreciate the logistics and everything that go into that. Before we get started, commission members, are there any amendments to the agenda that anyone would like to propose? Okay. Not hearing any. Can I have a motion to approve the meeting minutes from April 21st?
I move to approve.
Thanks, Rebecca. A second?
I'll second.
Thanks, Jennifer. Any discussion or changes that anyone needs to make? I'm going to do a quick roll call because I suspect some folks weren't there. I'll start with the folks in the room again. So all those in favor signify by saying aye, and this is in favor of approving the minutes from the 21st. Mike, you want to start?
Aye.
Aye.
Actually, let me do it this. Let me do it this way. Are there any abstentions? Okay, that is easier to do it that way. So the motion carries, our minutes are approved. Thank you, everyone. So I'm going to move us on. We're pretty close to on time. So we have a few minutes for public comment. We also will have some time at the end of the meeting Just a quick reminder about public comment in general. This is an opportunity for members of the public to address the commission. There is also an opportunity when we are in committees for members of the public to join those committees if they so decide, and provide input that way. At this point in the meeting, we would love to hear from folks. You may not hear directly back from us right away during this meeting, but we'll take your comments into consideration and either be back in touch or possibly add something or to a future agenda. And typically we alternate between folks in the room and folks on the screen. I'll ask my colleagues who are in the room to help organize that. And we'll start with someone in the room. If you are on the screen and you would like to address the commission, please raise your hand and we'll sort of put you in the queue.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sitting right next to Representative Conlon, and then I can turn this and they can see you and they should be able to hear you. Probably move the wire. Megan, can you see?
I can, yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Can you
Good
hear? Sorry, can you hear? Okay.
Yep.
Good afternoon, everybody. Good to be here in southern Vermont, and happy Cinco de Mayo to you all. I'm Ken Fredette from up the road a piece from Wallingford, and I'm also from the Friends of Vermont Public Education. I appreciate it, as always, the opportunity to speak today. In South Burlington last month, I shared that I was heartened that the House version of 454, H454, at that point in time included a new charge to this commission. Later in April, on the morning of the 24th to be precise, I had a conversation with Dave Sharp up in Bristol. Before the cameras rolled, I told Dave I was pleased that Senate Ed hadn't done a strike all when 454 came over from the House. And during the interview, I noted that it seemed the committee was being very deliberate. Dave and I went out to lunch after the recording, and when I got back home later that afternoon, I learned that Senate Ed had done the strike all. That would have been good information to have before the interview, but I actually don't think it would have changed much of what I had to say. The governor's initial proposal had issues, but it was a starting point. I know that many representatives had concerns with the version that was presented by House Ed, but it passed muster, with some clarifying that they voted yes, just to keep the process moving forward. As I understand it, it was much the same with some members of Senate Ed when voting it out of committee last Friday. Senate Ed made changes that could easily be seen as moving in the wrong direction. One is pulling the plug on this commission before the original sunset date at the end of this year. A huge problem I see is limiting membership of the school district boundary task force to legislators only. This process should and must be apolitical. There are other issues with the current version, of course, such as further tipping the playing field by including special treatments for private and independent schools, instead of leveling the field for all Vermont students by applying the same rules to all schools receiving tax dollars. Further, the current lack of resources afforded to the AOE, which has contributed to a backlog of independent school reviews, now has much greater urgency given the reports of abuse of some of our most vulnerable students that must be redressed. I know several members of the board on Friends, myself included, would be glad to provide testimony to appropriate legislative committees. But for today, let me close with this. I understand Senate Ed included discussions of finance amongst their deliberations. I hope that opens the door for Senate Finance to include discussions of policy to help right this ship. Thank you very much and good luck to you all.
Thanks, Ken. I do not see hands from folks online. So is there someone else in the room who would like to speak? Oh, I think I see a hand. Great. Yeah, exactly. Come up to the same spot. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Kathy Larson. I don't have a formal statement, but I just wanted to welcome the commission down here. I'm a member of the Twin Valley School Board, and we're very happy to know that you are still very aware of Southern Vermont. Thank you for coming, and good luck with your work.
Thank you, Kathy. Appreciate it. Is there anyone on the screen who would like to address the commission? Okay. And anyone else in the room? Okay, great. There will be another opportunity at the end of the meeting, and I would also just share that on the agenda today is an update around just engagement and input sessions in general, what those will look like, and ideally a discussion of some actual dates. We recognize that public meetings are meetings of the commission held in public, and they aren't always the most satisfying way to have a back and forth engagement. And it is our part of our work is to do that. So we'll have an update about that. All right, I'm going to move us on to the next agenda item, which is a legislative proposal discussion. I would just sort of acknowledge what I think is at this point a familiar refrain to members of the commission and the public, which is that we are trying to do our work in a very changeable and variable context. At our last meeting, I wasn't there, but my understanding is there was a discussion and a recognition that it would help the commission to have sort of a side-by-side discussion of the administration's proposal and the House bill, H454. Rather to the point of one of our public commenters, there has since been an additional bill that is still in committee with Senate Education, but that bill is significantly different than H454. So in keeping with our goal to continue with our work and at the same time provide input and information to the legislature as it does its work, what we would like to do is spend a little bit of time today kicking off our meeting just being able to surface some initial reactions to the two current, and I use that term loosely. I understand that the legislative process is not as concrete as what I'm describing, but the Senate has a working bill that they are discussing in committee. There was H454 that passed out of the House. And the commission has gotten materials that just update them on what was most recent as of Friday for each of those bills. So we will start in a second by having a little bit of an update from Rep. Conlon around the House bill to the extent that there is an update. I know that Senator Cummings is not here today, so I don't know that we will specifically have a Senate update. Secretary Saunders can sort of just share some recent information from the agency. And then we'll move into just a commission discussion. And I would like our discussion, and I'll say this again when we get to that point, but to center around the extent to which the current proposals are addressing the initial findings of this commission. And you all received this in your agenda materials, but just elevating our finding that of the three policy issues, governance, finance, and quality or delivery system, there's a recognition that those all intersect and interact with each other, and that the solution lies in changes being made to each one. So that's the framework through which we will have our discussion. The purpose of the discussion is to give, not to try to reach consensus or a formal position on legislation, but to give the legislators real-time information and perspectives from the commission. So I just said a lot. I'm going to go back and just start with Rep. Conlon. Do you want to give a little bit of an update just of what you know from your standpoint?
Sure. So the original bill H454 there was the original H454, but then we had the bill that passed the House, went to the Senate Education Committee. They worked on it for a couple of weeks and voted out their version of it Friday afternoon, Friday evening. I guess I'd highlight a few key changes that might be helpful. They did not get into the sort of property tax reform part of it, so that will be Senate Finance. However, the differences are they took out specific sort of numerical requirements and guidelines that we had in there about class size minimums, about district size minimums, and about school size minimum goals once there is a school construction financing program in. They changed the district boundary group from a subcommittee of folks from the field under the auspices of our commission to a standalone task force of only 8 legislators with staffing help from the Joint Fiscal Office, Legislative Council, and with a budget attached to that. They removed our proposal that 2 of the 8 picks on the State Board of Education be with the legislature, not entirely with the governor. They did work on the foundation formula that came up with a new base that is sort of somewhere between the Colby number that we proposed and the APA number that was proposed in the original H454. And that formula that came out of the Senate Education Committee also included grade level weights, which I don't think either the APA's evidence-based model or the House's cost factor model had any sort of evidence to support grade level weights. Just trying to think of any, and those are sort of the major changes that were there. There are a few smaller ones, such as the district boundary task force was required to take into account the continuation of supervisory unions and the continuation of tuitioning where it exists currently. That's about it for the major changes. It'll go to the Senate Finance Committee now. I think they've got 2 weeks with it. They'll be dealing mostly with the sort of property tax and other tax changes that are in there because that's more in their purview. To the extent to which they will go into policy, I'm not sure. The extent to which they'll go into foundation formula, I'm not sure. I think there's appetite on some members to do that, and others may say, no, our sort of areas are divided more than that. So not quite sure what will happen there. I'm sure we'll see some changes though.
Thanks, Peter. Zoe, do you want to just sort of give an update from the agency standpoint? And then we'll see if folks have questions before we get into discussion.
Certainly. Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I think it's important to start from, again, reiterating where we have shared understanding in ways that I think are very aligned to what the Commission has put forward. The Commission on the Future of Public Education, we've said repeatedly that there's no one silver bullet, there's no one simple solution, that we really need to take a multi-pronged approach that looks at funding, governance, and education quality. And so to that end, the role for the Agency of Education is to continue to evaluate the different policy proposals put forward according to those objectives. And so we have come forward in the last week with some additional recommendations to really tighten those connections around governance, funding, and quality to really ensure that we're explicit around the policy assumptions built in and are strategic around how we can invest our dollars in ways that are going to support educational quality for students across the state, regardless of where they live, and make sure that we can have a sustainable, high-quality system that taxpayers can afford. And so as we think about there are some differences that I think are important for us to unpack, but there's really alignment around some key areas. The governor's proposal, the House's plan, and the Senate's plan all move us to a foundation formula. I'll talk a little bit about some of the differences and what is behind those foundation formulas to put a little bit more nuance on that. But the intent is to move to foundation formula to get us to a more equitable and transparent system. There tends to also be consensus on the need for larger districts to achieve scale. There are differences in terms of the process by which we determine those districts and some of the parameters around the district size and what we mean by scale. And then third, and I think most importantly, there is an intent to do this work in order to achieve equity of educational opportunities. And so this last week, the Agency of Education came forward with a revised model. And let me first, before we get there, the House put forward a two-staged approach. So the House contemplated a future state that would move towards an evidence-based model, but recognized that we needed to have a bridge between the current state and the future state. And the bridge was contemplated to be the cost factor analysis. The cost factor analysis operates under a very specific theory of action, which is a statistical model that analyzes the spending that is needed in the current system to achieve average performance. And so the methodology is really squarely situated within an assumption of the current state and does not assume changes of governance. It also does not include some of the additional expenses related to career and technical education, preschool education, and some other policy objectives. The Senate's proposal moves to a foundation formula, but does not take a two-stage approach. It moves to one foundation formula. It borrows from some of the principles of the cost factor analysis, and it borrows from some of the principles of the evidence-based model to arrive at the numbers proposed. We put forward a recommendation for an enhanced evidence-based model, and I'll explain some of the reasons that we did that. We think it's really important that we have clear continuity as we're rolling out a transformation plan, and that we're very explicit in communicating what is represented in that amount of funding. It's really important for us that the amount of money means something, and that meaning is directly related to what we can fund in our system. That's important because as a state, we have to be able to guarantee that with this revised funding formula, we can guarantee a high quality education for every student across the state. And so the enhancements we built in were really part of our ongoing work this whole session. So as you recall, in January, the governor put forward the proposal that included an adjusted evidence-based model. So the evidence-based model is a different theory of action. So we've talked about the cost factor analysis and the theory of action. The evidence-based model is based on years of research that identifies what inputs you need in the system in order to achieve a high-quality education. We looked at that. There was a study that the General Assembly commissioned by Picus and Auden to arrive at that recommendation. The Agency of Education, in cooperation with APA Consulting, made some adjustments to the original evidence-based model put forward in the Picus and Auden study, which we have been referring to as the adjusted evidence-based model, that brought into context some of the input that we received from the Listen and Learn around really what makes sense within the Vermont context, and also some professional judgment input from other states. In continuing to work through community engagement and with our policy sprint teams, we've identified a need for some additional enhancements, and that is what we've brought forward. I'm happy to go through some of those specifics, but those enhancements include providing additional funding to support multi-tiered systems of support. That was a really key point of feedback that we received from the field, that the adjusted evidence-based model didn't fully capture the resources that were needed to implement. So within this enhanced model, we've made some adjustments there. We've also made some adjustments in terms of assumptions around increasing average salaries by 10% for instructional staff. We also have heard the feedback around school size and have made some adjustments into the assumptions around what maximum efficiency would look like in Vermont. And so initially with the adjusted evidence-based model, we had some assumptions around an elementary school size being around 450. We have adjusted that to 300. I think it's really important to note that that doesn't mean every single elementary school will be operating at 300. It just shows that there's a different efficiency point for the state of Vermont. And as we've always recommended, if there are adjustments in size and there are smaller schools, there would need to be adjustments within the funding, and that's built in to our modeling. So I can go through some of the additional details, but wanted to really call out that the reason we believe strongly in moving with the enhanced evidence-based model is that it's really important that we're very clear on what this amount of funding will support, and it will create a very clear roadmap for how we get to the future state. The enhanced model does increase the overall base funding, so we're talking about similar amount of money in terms of the education opportunity payment, but being really clear around how those dollars can be reinvested in ways to meet explicit policy objectives. And those explicit policy objectives are related to increasing teacher salary, expanding college and career readiness, expanding pre-K access, ensuring that there is a consistent set of courses and extracurriculars available to our students, along with wraparound support and mental health and behavior intervention supports. So the evidence-based model does assume changes in terms of governance, and that being important to achieving scale. And we can talk a little bit more about that. But what you can really expect from the agency is to continue to be methodical in evaluating the different proposals that are put forward and resolutely focused on identifying what the system will actually fund and making sure we're really clear about outlining those policy objectives.
Thanks, Zoe. First, commission members, I'm going to ask for questions. I also just want to recognize there isn't really anyone here officially to speak to the Senate bill, so these aren't necessarily, there may be questions that we can ask of them, but are there any questions for either Peter or Zoe about any of the updates they shared? Okay.
The only other piece I might mention that we'll look at as part of the analysis is that education opportunity payment is not fully representative of the total cost of the education system. And so part of the kind of next series of questions is really understanding how those costs are represented. And it's really important that we have an overall understanding of the total cost. And so we've outlined some of those policy choices within the enhanced evidence-based model that we put forward. So there were really two objectives. One is to make sure that we're clearly articulating those policy assumptions. And then the second is to make sure that we're taking account of the total cost of the education system. And a key piece that we were focusing on in the enhanced model is really being thoughtful around how we make this transition. And so you'll see in that proposal, there's a lot of intentionality around supporting the transition, mitigating the kind of the fiscal cliffs that could be part of any transition from one funding system to another. And so within that, there's some additional cost to supporting the system, to doing that in a way that we think will really continue to support high quality teaching and learning through the process.
Thanks, Zoe. All right, so just a couple things to frame our discussion. Obviously, what we are reacting to is the version of the Senate bill that that you all have a copy of. We know that it is in process. And we've committed to updating the legislature on the commission's perspective. So like in past, after past discussions, I will sort of summarize what we've discussed and provide that back to the relevant committee. So that's the context. We're not trying to come to an official position, but give some initial policy reactions. And our guiding question is the extent to which the proposals address the findings of the commission. So I think that's just repeating what I've said to you all. What I'll do is we will go around and have everyone from the commission share their reaction. I'll start with you, Jay, since I saw your hand, and then I'll just sort of continue around. You can pass if you don't have anything specific. So that's how we'll handle the discussion. And then if folks want to say something after we've had everyone's opportunity to share, then we'll do that. Jay, go ahead. Except that we can't hear you. What I was going to say, Jay, if you want to send me an email with your comments when we get to the end, I am happy to read it on your behalf, if that is helpful. I realize that's not ideal, but. All right. I'm also happy to kick us off just to give everyone some more think time, if that works, just since I've had a chance to read through the bill. So the comments that I would share, first, a very logistical one related to the role, the change in charge, and the change in timeline of the commission. I'll start with that. And I have a logistical and a more substantive comment related to that. First, the more recent version of the Senate bill proposes to narrow the charge of this commission to focus on state level governance. That's really the role of the State Board of Ed and the role of the agency, and provide its perspective and recommendations on that. And it proposes to sunset the commission as of August 1st. So our perspective on those two issues would be due by August 1st, and then the commission would sunset. My logistical comment on that is this commission has had the challenge of trying to navigate this policy landscape and be useful to the legislature and also implement the charge that is what we have currently. And if we were to pivot for an August 1st timeline, we would need to pivot pretty quickly. And if we pivot based on the possibility that that particular language would remain, and then something happens and that language doesn't remain, or that bill as described doesn't pass, then we have lost that amount of time to kind of get ourselves back to our original agenda. So logistically, it puts us in a bit of an uncomfortable position as a commission. I'm not sure we would be able to do justice to that revised charge, and we certainly wouldn't be able to do justice to what we are currently asked to do if that in fact becomes our reality, because our charge doesn't change until the legislature changes it. And that's what we're navigating. So that's my logistical concern about that. My broader concern is just this commission has and continues to focus on community engagement and public input. And I am not sure, certainly I, as chair, having read all of our public comment and listened to folks, I have not heard a bit of input that suggests that we shouldn't give our perspective on ed transformation. So I am not sure we're hearing a message from the public that says we should narrow our charge. I think what we're hearing instead is please continue to give your perspective on transformation. So I think I would have a more substantive concern about the full narrowing of our charge. And then my other comments related to the Senate proposal. The first is, the focus of our work is on the intersection of how we deliver education so that we do it well, how we fund education, and how we make decisions about education, and that's governance. And the Senate bill addresses finance, and it addresses governance because it proposes to ask a group of legislators to redistrict. But it removes some of a number of the provisions from the House version of the bill related to the delivery system. And that is things like class sizes and school sizes. And even though there's still open debate about whether or not those are perfect measures of delivery, in fact, they're probably imperfect, they are still areas that focus on delivery system, because my understanding is that those were put in place because they're related to how kids learn best. So my concern is that there wouldn't be any provisions in the Senate bill that touch on quality. And that is, for me, that's a big missing piece, and it's not in alignment with sort of the findings of this body as a commission. I have concerns around the group tasked with redistricting. That's a pretty substantive decision to be made, which is if there are going to be new districts, what should they be and how big they are. So those are the things that jump out for me. And I only started so that others could gather their thoughts. So I don't know if folks in the room, if we just want to start across the table there, and then, or I see Oliver's hand. Why don't we go with Oliver, and then I'll go back to someone in the room.
And just a quick clarification, Megan, you mentioned August as the commission ceasing to exist, but when I read the bill, page 14, it has the final report due September 30th, and then the commission sunsetting in October. So I'm not sure August. I'm not sure where that came from.
That could be the version that I'm speaking to. So I have not read a version that came out past what I sent on Friday, which actually, let me clarify that. Friday, I sent a link to, I think, version 7.0, and I don't know that I even read 7.0. So it's possible that it's changed to what you're sharing.
So I think just as we're going through this, we should be careful to sort of narrow our comments to what passed, which is on their website.
Yeah, I think my comment would still stand, whether you're talking about a September delivery date or an October, it's still a pretty short window. So thanks for the clarification. Folks in the room, do you want to start?
I'll go.
Thanks, Jen.
So, I sort of have some disparate thoughts that I'll try to weave together. And I'll go back to Zoe's comment that she reiterated earlier, which is, I think if we look at what has been proposed, there is general consensus around, the need to move to a foundation formula, the need to reduce the number of districts. And so I know there was another point there too, but I think there's a lot of alignment here, which I think is a good thing. I mean, the devil is always in the details, but I think for me to kind of take a step back and say, okay, we've got, different competing versions of how they sort of squeeze the apples to make the applesauce. But fundamentally, I think we can all agree on the overarching goals. And I also want to acknowledge the agency for really getting all of this started. I know the original version of H 454 that was proposed by the governor has changed immensely since it was proposed in January, but it really did get the conversation started in a way that I think has been very helpful, because it's always easier to react to something than it is to create it in the first instance. So when I look at this, I think a lot of good has come out of the last few months. And for me, this has kind of always been a struggle of when I look at what the commission was set up to do, a lot of the original duties that were set forth in the act, we haven't had to deal with, because the governor came up with its proposal, which kind of, stole our thunder, but in a way that I don't think was a bad thing, because I think I'm more concerned about the work getting done and not so wedded to who does it. And I think it's been really important that, the commission exists maybe to ensure that that work is getting done. But I'm not necessarily troubled by the decision of who's going to be doing that work and who's going to be making, the decisions that ultimately are going to shape education.
Thanks, Jennifer. Mike, you want to go next? Sorry, you're the next person I can see.
Sure. I was jotting down some notes as well, and I would also echo what one of our speakers said at the beginning of the meeting, that I thought we were making some good progress. While there are some themes that are common, it seems like there's a big difference between some of those details in the House bill and the Senate bill. And we're sitting in May, so it does concern me of where we are, and also the fact that it appears to me, as someone who's a sitting superintendent looking at costs and rising costs, that we're getting away from some more of those cost drivers, like special education, like healthcare that we talked about, that are really impacting our budgets. So there are some areas I think that really need to be ironed out, and I've had a hard time in the last week keeping up with where the debates were, specifically with the funding formula. But the questions I have are more questions at this point. I know there's been discussion about the study from Pikus and Ogden, but I also heard Larry Pikus talk to Ways and Means and Senate Finance in a joint meeting about 2 months ago, where he said that was really just the starting point of a conversation. And then a lot of reconciliation would have to take place. So again, there are the details that really concern me when I take a look at what school districts are spending, what our needs are, and some of the changes that would be impacted by moving to different size districts. When you move to, I was in a conversation with the board chair in my district as a superintendent, who was the board chair during the unification process in 2017. And she talked about that process with a supervisory union that moved to a unified union school district on the accelerated time frame in 2 years, and said that it took a tremendous amount of work to just accomplish that one project in a district that had already had those relationships and different kinds of systems already built in. So I am concerned, and it's feedback I would give, that we are in May, and to make the kind of changes that are being contemplated in the Senate bill will take a lot of thought and a lot of discussion and a lot of planning. And I would see that I think this body plays an important role, an important voice in what that would look like moving forward, which was contemplated in the House bill. So again, just some comments and questions. Everything is moving very quickly, and I think at this point I have more questions than comments and answers on the process and where it is.
Thanks, Mike. I'll bounce to someone on the screen. Rebecca, you're next, or you're first on my screen.
Sure. Yeah, as this has moved through the chambers of the legislature, I think that what's become clear to me that is that policymakers in the legislature are kind of like narrowing in on spending about the same amount as we're spending this year, FY25 overall, as kind of like through a foundation formula design, which is a little different than the what was contemplated in the original proposal, where the foundation formula would kick in around the same time that we were getting scale and efficiency from governance changes, which would have allowed for kind of like a lower overall spend. So at the tax department, we're really focused on bringing this conversation to Senate Finance and kind of showing what the overall, statewide tax impacts would be for this line of planning, where we're, kind of as a starting place spending the same, and interested in discussing, what it means then to have supplemental district spending over that level, which wouldn't necessarily be falling on the statewide property tax rate, but would be falling on taxpayers in the districts that, might elect to do supplemental spending. So that's an area of this that we're interested to flesh out more as this moves through the Senate. And just kind of bring that like sustainability kind of like focus back into the discussion, because I think there's been a lot of important lift on the details on the education side of the house, and now the impact on property taxes is certainly also important to Vermonters. So I want to make sure that gets some attention this session as we close out.
Thanks, Rebecca. Jeff Fanon? back to the
Sure.
room.
So, yeah, I think the bill that's on the Senate Education Committee website, that's what I'm going to look at and comment about. So that's, that was the one that says voted out 6-0. They, as it relates to the future of the Public Education Commission, us, I think they direct us through a couple things found on page 8, at the bottom of page 8 of the bill, which is subdivision E2A. And it begins at the bottom of page 8 and then goes on a little bit to page 9. But we're really designed now, I think, focusing our attention more on governance, looking at the Agency of Education and its capacities, as well as to look at, I think this is important as we are in a school. Get some echo.
Try now, Jeff. I think.
Try now.
I think.
Okay. It talks about we should be looking at roles, functions, decisions at the state level, including process for communities to have a voice in decisions regarding school closures, and if so, recommendations for what that process should be. So I think that looks to be our attention. There's a lot deleted from our what should be on our radar and what we should be looking at, and it's more focused now. And that may be good for the commission. It may be good that we're focusing on that. And I think that particular, how we look at what the process is for communities to deal with a recommendation of somebody to close their school. If that's their decision, that's one thing. If it's somebody else, say Montpelier, telling them to close their school, I think that's a dramatically different process the community should be going through. So I think that's something we should be looking at. If this is the final version, and I know that it's probably not. It's heading on to Senate Finance, as Peter said, and we'll see what happens there. And then there's a conference committee, and who knows?
Thanks, Jeff. Elizabeth, we'll go to you on the screen.
Sure. So one of my things that I keep on going back to is I am a little bit concerned about the timeline, and not specific to particular items, but just kind of the overall plan of the timeline for the transformation and what parts of it happen when. Going back to something I think Michael was talking about, that consolidations and at any level and any scale can take a lot of time, and they're a lot of work. And so I think what concerns me most is that based on the timeline, whichever bill is actually passed as law, you can either have this turn out to be kind of a messy situation or a successful situation, no matter which bill is the one that we end up with. So I have some concerns about that. And I feel like looking at all the different models, it's really hard to tell where the timeline changes, if there's any difference between anybody, or if it's not real clear in any of the bills of what that transition timeline looks like. So that's my first comment. The second thing I think about a lot is the fact that in this Senate version, talking about the criteria or guidance that we get from looking at class size, school size, even if those numbers are not necessarily what we think are a perfect situation, I think having something in that gives guidance to the newly formed districts is super helpful. Because without any of that guidance, the decision-making surrounding their particular schools, their buildings, their location, when they're consolidated into a larger entity, and figuring out what's best for not only the students, but what classes you can actually offer, where people are going to attend school, those kind of decisions, it's going to be really difficult to make those decisions without any kind of guidance in the law. And so that's my only other thought.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Peter, do you want to go?
Sure. I was mostly going to listen, but I just will say that I sort of worry about curtailing the timeline of the commission, because the commission's really, once the legislature's out of session, it's really the only actively public-facing sort of group doing work. That's why we felt strongly about putting the district boundary work under the auspices of the commission, because the commission has a robust public engagement system in place. And these are, drawing new districts and empowering them as to what they will have for responsibilities, which is a major step in this whole transformation process. So I certainly can favor the continuation of the work and of the commission, and this work be done in concert with the public engagement process. But I remain concerned about that going away. And as in terms of like, how do we proceed as a group currently, is we still have to sort of proceed under the original charge until that has changed.
Thanks, Peter. John, you're the next in my list on the screen. John, I know you were going to be on and off, so I'll give you a second if you want to share now. Otherwise, we'll circle back to you.
Yeah, I'll pass for now. Thanks, Megan.
Okay. Yep. Thanks. Oliver, you are next on my list of screen people.
Yeah, I'll pass for now. Thanks.
Okay. Did I miss anyone before? Oh, first, let me check to see if I have an email from Jay. I do. Oh, Jay is on the phone. You must be that phone number. Jay, do you want to go ahead and share? Let me see if I can unmute you. Might be hard. Nope, I can't unmute. I'm going to take a stab at reading what Jay sent. And Jay, if you are able to unmute, actually, Maureen or Suzanne, one of you knows how to do it.
*6
would be *6.
Okay. Jay, try *6. And if that doesn't work, I'll read what you sent. Great. You look unmuted.
Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yes, you can hear me?
I can.
Perfect. First of all, I don't need Jeff Fannin texting me saying I never sounded better when I'm muted. So I just wanted to say real quickly, I jotted down a few notes. I think that the governor's original plan and the Senate education plan thus far are very flawed. Although I don't agree with everything in the House plan, I feel like the work of the House Education and Ways and Means committees were at least clear on their goals, and that those goals were aligned with the work of this commission. I feel the governor's bill focuses on finance, and although we've heard the administration talk about education quality, I really saw nothing in their bill that would improve education quality for Vermont kids, except for the move eventually to better scale. And their plan in that direction is way too much too soon and would have led to major cuts for programming and student needs in some districts in the state, including many who are already operating at scale. The Senate's plan thus far seems very political. I think it looks like it seeks to protect more independent schools, more small schools, very small class sizes, and very small schools. These are policy decisions, and if that's the way we want to go, that's okay. But if we're going to move in this direction, I question why we do anything at all. I also support some type of foundation formula, but it can't be a formula that gets programs for kids that are in systems that are already at scale. We've been financially providing extra resources for very small schools that are small by choice. And again, this is a financial decision and a policy choice, but I'm not sure how that improves our system or provides for any transformation of the educational delivery model. I think if we're not serious about significant change, including improving scale for student outcomes, financial sustainability, and moving toward effective school districts, I'd rather we did nothing. And moving forward with large, ineffective supervisory unions makes no sense to me at all. That's it from me. Thank you.
Thanks, Jay. I'll open it up to any commission members who want to circle back. So Zoe, go ahead.
Absolutely. So just want to clarify the governor's original proposal and the proposal for enhanced evidence-based model has a clear theory of action around how we will support educational quality. The evidence-based model clearly articulates the resources that will be available to our students and the additional resources available to our teachers in order to meet the full needs of students. And those needs have been contemplated to look at their academic needs along with their social emotional needs as well. The enhanced evidence-based model builds upon what we first proposed and is very responsive to feedback that we heard from the field. It allows us to increase instructional salaries by 10%. It allows us to bring in additional support to deliver multi-tiered systems of support for our students. It allows us to expand college and technical education starting in middle school so that we're really allowing our students to explore a variety of interests. It allows for all of our schools to be able to provide a rich array of course offerings and electives. It allows our schools to have support by mental health professionals and behavior interventionists. It also allows to have pooling resources in a way that is going to meet the needs of every school and classroom. So the overall approach is designed explicitly to support educational quality. The enhanced evidence-based model really gets us to around current spending, but articulates a clear path for how we can invest those dollars in ways that are going to promote educational quality. It is responsive to some of the challenges that have been systemic in our Vermont education system for many, many years. And also, very importantly, the enhanced model is contemplating that roadmap so that we are really accounting for the challenge of making this change to ensure that there is a hold harmless year in effect. So we actually have a 4-year roadmap in place to help to support that transition, recognizing that current districts may spend more and others may spend less. And so that we're able to support that transition as we're moving to new districts. So I would encourage you to look at the proposal and think about how some of these things can be contemplated as the General Assembly is moving forward. But again, we're all talking about a lot of the same goals. And what we're trying to do and what the governor's proposal has tried to do from the beginning is iterate. So you can see there's been now 2 or more iterations on this to really capture what it is we're trying to do with education quality and ensuring that this dollar amount means something and is able to fund a high quality, equitable system. So we're really pushing to articulate all of the assumptions that are built into that so that there really is that confidence and understanding of what this means for education quality in our state.
Thanks, Zoe. Okay, thanks for raising hands. I just threw myself in the queue. I had 2 thoughts as we circle back. One that just I was thinking about related both to Zoe and Jay's comments. I do think that, and I think this has been asked, and I believe it's something that people understand is needed, but I would just elevate it again. Need to model this next iteration of a potential amount on districts. And I understand that there is confusion around what do we model it on, the current or on the future. However, one of the things that this commission has heard, and it is true, and it's related to Jay's comment about scale, that even with the House Foundation amount, some current districts who already operate at scale would have significantly less funding. That's true of that amount. And then that is also going to be true of the lesser amount. So regardless, some modeling needs to be done because there are impacts to current districts, including districts that operate at scale. And so that's going to be inevitable. The second piece that I thought about as people were sharing, this kind of goes back to the role of the commission. I would remind us that not only are we committed to engagement, we have also committed resources to the engagement process, and we are expending taxpayer resources to continue this. And I would be concerned if the General Assembly is not opting to use the input that we receive because we continue to expend funds to do so. And so there's a very practical, if the commission's work is not meaningful to the legislature, they need to know that they are expending funds, right? Because they have asked us to expend funds. We have chosen to expend them on the engagement portion. So it just feels like that is worth saying, especially as conversations continue to move really quickly. Mike and then Oliver.
And I understand that we're looking at some of more of the big picture items, but I do want to address a little bit of a concern from superintendents on the modeling, especially in the current Senate bill. Again, I have not been able to, because it has not moved to Senate Finance yet, I think we have some other time before we can give a good analysis of the bill in the Senate side. But I do know from watching a lot of committee meetings and having a lot of conversations that Ways and Means in the House did a lot of work on those early pieces, knowing that a lot of work still needs to be accomplished in the future. When I first saw the initial proposal that came out from the governor, one of the big concerns I had was moving to 5 districts and salary, because we've seen before where some unintended consequences of leveling up. And I do think my read of the current adjusted formula is that it's based on an average salary. There may be 10% increases for some below. But my big concern would be, and again, this goes to the point of a deliberate, thoughtful process, would we be looking at teachers who would suffer significant salary decreases because of the modeling that's in that current adjusted proposal? So again, we haven't had a lot of time to really dissect that. That's something I'd be interested in discussing more in depth at our next meeting, depending on what happens between now and June. But that is an area that significantly concerns superintendents in the cost modeling that's currently on the table.
Thanks, Mike. Oliver?
Yeah, thanks. Something Jay said earlier a few minutes ago kind of brought to mind. I think an important point with respect to independent schools that I think is getting lost here is, with the proposal that left the Senate Education Committee, unless I've missed something, I don't think any public schools are closed. I don't think any public school opportunities are taken away from students. But I will point out that a good 50% of Vermont's independent schools that have traditionally been accessible to students will be off the table as of this fall. So it's pretty seismic shift for independent schools in Vermont under the bill that passed out of the Senate. And I would also point out, I think even more importantly, it's a pretty seismic shift for the students, right? Because what we're doing is essentially eliminating a lot of options and a lot of opportunities for students, particularly those students in more rural parts of the state. And I would be remiss if I didn't point that out.
Thanks, Oliver. Any other comments? All right, Mike, okay. I wasn't sure if that was an old hand. Okay. Okay, thank you, commission members. So I think that probably wraps up our discussion. And I will just reiterate and elevate the purpose. Because things move so quickly, we will always be reacting to a version that is perhaps a version or two old because of the nature of how often we meet compared to how quickly the legislature moves. So what we will do is provide a summary of the conversation back to the relevant committees. I have not yet heard back. I had let the commission know that we had requested an opportunity to present or speak with Senate Education Committee, and we have still not heard back on that request. I will send them our perspective regardless, as well as the other committees of record. And with that, I think I think I'm I'm trying to figure out when to do a break. I think I'm going to do it after this next agenda item because we have our partners from Afton here, and they are going to give us an update on some of our engagement conversations. So I'm going to move us to that agenda item. After that, then we will take a short break and then resume with our committees. So just by way of context, and then I'll turn it over to Afton. I want to thank Afton Partners for being incredibly responsive to this commission as we navigate the changes to our own operation. It also changes not just how they are operating, but sort of what they were originally asked to do has changed. And so they have been very patient with that and really helpful behind the scenes in that process. And as the commission is aware, originally we were charged with developing an engagement plan. We drafted a plan and wanted to revise that plan with the benefit of our partners. We've changed a little bit what our goal is. Our goal right now is to maximize getting more interactive public input opportunities that are more accessible to Vermonters on the books, so to speak. That's what Afton will share a little bit about. We know that the exact questions we ask might change even between now and when they are scheduled, but the important thing is to move forward with that. So just want to express appreciation to our consultants, and I will turn it over maybe to you, Aressa.
Yes, thank you. Let me share my screen. Make sure it's sharing. Okay, wonderful. Well, thank you so much for that introduction, Megan, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, as always, for allowing us to join you. My name is Aressa Coley. I'm with Afton Partners, and as Megan shared, our team is supporting the commission to develop a communications and engagement framework to help guide its work. And through this process, we're also supporting the commission to communicate and engage with diverse populations throughout the state. I'm joined today by my colleagues, Kristen Garcia, who's also with Afton Partners, and Maura Keeney with Collaborative Communications, and you'll hear more from Maura in just a bit. So during our time together today, we're going to review our approach for near-term community engagement. This is a shift or a pivot that we kind of previewed during the last time we were with the commission on the 21st, and then Maura will provide an update on evolving communications and key messaging. When we last met during the April 21st commission meeting, we previewed a revision to our work plan that included facilitating 5 virtual engagement opportunities with priority populations across the state. We see this shift as really an opportunity to hear directly from communities before the end of the legislative session. And so the proposed approach that we will review with you includes our engagement with communities across the state and our proposed approach to engaging with the commission's legislatively mandated partners. And we'll focus more on those legislatively mandated partners on the next slide. So beginning with our broader virtual engagement, we have proposed the dates you see on your screen to host virtual 90-minute engagement sessions in May and June. You'll see through the dates that are proposed, we've included some options for both afternoon and evening engagement to accommodate different schedules and to enhance virtual access as much as possible. So you'll see times kind of alternating between a 2 to 3:30 p.m. slot, all times are in Eastern, and then some evening sessions, knowing that some educators, students, service providers, et cetera, may only be, some folks it's easier to join during the day, and some folks they really need to wait until they transition home to join. The 2 columns you see on your right reflect the populations and recommended partners that have been highlighted for us by commissioners and members of the public that we really want to prioritize for this engagement. So while these virtual opportunities will, of course, be open to everyone, we are going to really try to target some of our recruitment to make sure we're engaging with voices who may be farthest from opportunity in this space or may not have been able to participate in prior opportunities. So the priority populations for outreach that have been elevated for us include families in rural areas, but particularly in southern Vermont, families and children with disabilities, multilingual learners, multicultural communities, communities of color, families from low socioeconomic backgrounds, and individuals and families from the LGBTQIA+ community. We've also identified a number of community-based partners who work directly with these populations who can help us to spread the word. And Maura will talk about this in her messaging and communications update, but who will also kind of help us keep our ears to the ground around emerging needs and ways that we can really enhance engagement with these populations. So I won't read through all of the partners that have been identified, but just naming that these were elevated from prior conversations with commissioners and members of the public. So before we shift to talking about our legislatively mandated partners, I do just want to pause and see if there are any other populations that we should prioritize for the upcoming virtual sessions, and or if there are any additional partners that we can include to help us with our outreach. And I see Jay, you have a hand up. Oh, we can't hear you.
Yeah,
You might need to hit *6 again.
Hear me now?
Yep.
Yes.
All right, I'm no longer muted. I'm wondering, I'm thinking specifically of families with children with disabilities, and knowing a lot of people in that community, the 2 to 3:30, I mean, I'm getting my kid from school and those types of things, and at night I'm taking care of my kid. I wonder if there should be at least one morning virtual engagement session day for families while their kids are at school that have younger children, where they might be able to attend. Just a thought I'd throw it out there. Thank you.
Thank you, Jay. That's a great suggestion. We can think about offering like at least one morning session. Are there any other recommendations for additional populations or partners?
I don't have a recommendation, but related to that question, I also would just remind folks that in addition to that, that's part of also why we have these specific outreach partners, so that we can figure out what, not only when could we offer something that others can participate, but they also represent a population that's particularly important. So I just want to highlight that the two go together. That's all.
Thank you, Megan. Yes, Jennifer.
Thanks. So for these 5 engagement sessions, these are sort of open invitations to everyone? You're not targeting, one group for one session, one group for another session. It's really whoever shows up in that hour-and-a-half period. Just want to make sure I'm thinking about this correctly.
Yes, these are open to everyone, but we will work with these partners to really make sure as much as possible that we have these individuals in the priority populations represented. So we don't want to limit anyone from providing input and opportunity, but we really want to make sure we're tailoring needs to be as virtually accessible as possible for these priority populations.
Thanks.
We also have registration fields that capture like people's different identity markers. So based on race, location, various other identities. And so that'll like help inform if we have any gaps in who we're talking to.
Thank you, Kristen. That raises an important point. We'd like to use this first round of virtual engagement sessions and using the data that Kristen described to help us identify where we need to follow up with even more targeted enhancements and engagement that could come in the form of follow-up in-person opportunities. So we're using this both as the engagement mechanism, but also as kind of our data kind of gut check around how these existing mechanisms, how well they're doing in reaching the populations we intend to reach. And that will give us some time for adjustment and refinement. Moving us along to our legislatively mandated partners, we plan on conducting a combination of interviews and focus groups with these partners in late May through early June. For some of these legislatively mandated partners, we've proposed kind of grouping them together into either a group interview versus some others where there are focus groups, depending on the focus of their work and potentially who is designated. But these modes of engagement might shift just a bit once we start to schedule. But what we're proposing is actually conducting the Department of Mental Health and Office of Racial Equity's interview together. Designees from the president of the University of Vermont and chancellor of Vermont State Colleges will be in a focus group. We're anticipating this will be a slightly largest group to ensure representation. We'll also have a focus group with the Vermont Youth Council, and then group interviews for the Department of Labor and the Commission on Public School Health Benefits as kind of one grouping, and then including representatives of the community schools model and an organization that's committed to ensuring equal representation and educational equity, also kind of grouped together. So just want to pause to see if there's any feedback on the proposed groupings or any adjustments you may recommend. I'm sorry, I will flag one last thing as you're thinking, that one of the legislatively mandated groups focused on pre-K alignment has recently sunset. So for this engagement, we will likely be building on any existing findings or recommendations, but then maybe following up with individuals who were a part of that work. Okay, if there are no, oh, yes.
Just thinking of other groups, have you considered Up for Learning and Outright Vermont as well? I didn't see them listed.
We will make sure they're added. You said Up for Learning, and what was the second one?
Up for Learning and Outright Vermont.
Outright Vermont. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I think those have definitely, both those organizations have been part of our conversations. Up for Learning is one of the groups in particular that'll dovetail with the Vermont Youth Council because they focus on youth engagement. So yeah, that's good. Thanks, Mike.
Yeah, and Up for Learning has already been facilitating policy discussions with students. So those students are really well versed on the different proposals on the table, and I think will be very, very valuable to the discussion.
Wonderful, thank you. It always helps when folks have been engaged along the way. You can have those deeper conversations when they're familiar with the content. Any other recommendations? Not seeing any hands, so with that, I'm going to turn things over to Maura.
Oh, Zoom is not letting me turn my camera on. Hold on. Oh, can you see me and hear me?
Yes. Yep.
Okay. So I was having some technical issues. So thanks for having me today. I just wanted to give a quick update on a document that I believe Megan would have shared with you and that we can make sure you all get afterwards. But we really thought it would be a helpful activity rather than sort of an official press release, but just to put out a document that gives an update on the activities of the commission, what's been going on to date, and reminding folks, as well as highlighting and promoting the virtual sessions that Aressa walked through. So in this document, folks could link through to all of the various lists of sessions and then immediately go to register for them. So our thinking is that with this document, it would be wonderful if you all could share with some of your colleagues and networks and folks to keep them updated on what's going on. And we could also share with members of the media so they could promote these opportunities, as well as reach out if they have any questions or want to get any more details on the commission. So happy to answer any questions about the document or its purpose with you, but really just trying to keep people informed in a sort of more friendly, easy 2-page kinds of thing versus some of the longer documents that are there. That said, they do link to the longer documents. So those who want to go into more detail on the full reports would certainly have that availability to them as well. That's it for me on that, but yeah, welcome any feedback as you take a chance to review.
Great. I just wanted to orient anyone who is joining on the screen. Commission members, this is what you received on Friday, and those joining the meeting, these are linked under our agenda materials for today on the website. So just wanted to orient folks to what we were talking about.
Thank you, Megan.
Don't think I hear any input. I would just say, from my perspective, it is very helpful to have some more accessible and readable sort of soundbite version of our work, because it feels very complex and very wordy at times. And so that's been really helpful. So commission members, if you have not already forwarded on to your channels, please do. All right. Afton, anything else? Oh, go ahead, Jennifer. Sorry.
No, it was the last minute thought. Has Afton put together any sort of announcement with regard to the 5 public engagement virtual sessions that could be included with the update that we're sending out?
Yeah, good question. We wanted to confirm the dates here. In what you received, they will get those dates by clicking on, there's a spot on what you received that says click here if you want to join a virtual session. So if you have already sent it out, people still will have access, and we can have a separate front and center with the dates that can come out, that can follow it. So I don't know if that makes sense. It's in there, but not in text on the 2-pager, because we wanted to double check the dates. But if anyone did forward and they clicked, they can register for them. And now that we did not hear any disagreement about the dates, although we did talk about possibly a morning session, we can push out a
separate flyer.
Front and center.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Great. Thanks. All right. Thank you, Afton, and continued thanks for your flexibility. I think with that, it is just before 2:30. Let's take a break. I'm going to suggest just over 10 minutes so that we will come back at 2:40. We will be moving into committee meetings at that time, but let's orient ourselves when we come back at 2:40 so that folks can actually take a break. So we'll see you back in 10 minutes. All right, welcome back, everyone. It's 2:40, a little past. We are at the part of our agenda where we will have time in committees. Just a couple of logistics. The committees will be working on questions 3 and 4 in the protocol that they've been working through. Those questions are around what data is needed to consider these policies, and then starting to think about how the proposed policies seek to enhance services and or reduce disparities to underrepresented or underserved communities. So those are the questions, commission members, from your work plan materials that you have. And then logistically, because 2 committees, their entire membership is online, we will just have 3 virtual meeting rooms for our committees. The folks in the room will use their laptops to log in, and members of the, yep,
Sorry,
go ahead.
Jeff Bannon is here, so you're on the quality committee, right? You're on the quality committee.
Setting up the quality meeting with more space.
So that would be an option for people here.
Great. Perfect. So we have more than we thought in person. So I will let the folks in the room communicate to the members of the public about how to join those committees. Those of you that are on the screen, if you are choosing to listen into a committee, on the commission's website are links to each of the 3. And you will leave this meeting and join a different meeting to be able to do that. We will reconvene on this meeting link, the main session, at 3:35. So commission members, just monitor your time and be prepared to pop back on the main meeting at 3:35, and we will do updates from the committee. So obviously make sure your committee is ready to report back to the full group. And with that, I'm gonna pop off this, and folks will organize themselves in there. committee meeting. All right, maybe we do have someone from every group back, actually. Are folks ready to share out? I don't actually know if people in the room can hear me.
Yeah, oh, sorry.
You can, okay, sorry.
Okay, so, we kind of went into deeper detail on questions 3 and 4 that, were presented as part of the updated, work plan.
Sorry,
And
just a quick, this is the governance group, right?
yes,
Sorry,
yes.
go ahead.
So what we decided, because we laid out some, things that we would like to see, to be able to answer those questions. We really took the questions more as, not what data do we have and what did we learn, but more what data would we like and what do we hope to learn? And so we kind of reframed the question a little bit. And so we added to our list that we had generated at our last meeting. And I think, really to kind of distill it, and I think these meeting minutes will be circulated, but, looking at the data through the lens of how does governance advance the commission's goals, and within governance, how to enhance the money that's being spent as intended, or to ensure, I'm sorry, how to ensure that the money is being spent as intended, and that the highest quality is being achieved. And we really focused on the importance of data, both in terms of driving decisions that are being made by the General Assembly to design this new system, but also then the importance of data going forward to ensure that the goals that we've set out are actually being achieved. Want to add anything?
Oh, it's a good summary.
All right.
Great, thanks. How about the finance committee? Want to share out?
Yes, thank you. I'm usually, as like the person wearing the tax hat, a little more outnumbered with education folks. So our conversation was like a little more tax side than in past meetings. So, and I asked Elizabeth to add some flavor here to these notes as needed. So, yeah, I guess I'll jump ahead because I feel like we had a lot of similarities with the governance group when we were thinking about question 4. Enhanced services and reducing disparities to the underrepresented and underserved communities. We were definitely feel that each of the, kind of like 4 proposals that are, live in the State House, target enhancing services like through sharing and scale. And that, that runs throughout each of those, but, making sure those weights adequately sustain the needs, both like in their design and then also how like the accountability side, the follow-up, kind of like what Jennifer just discussed, if having like a large district, the importance of reporting back on outcomes, the accountability of spending relative to those weights. How can you be, what kind of report backs can be designed to make sure that, the school that's, generating those weights is seeing the spending that they need to serve their students. If there's a school that may have been considered underserved or their students had been considered underserved, how do you ensure that it doesn't continue being underserved within a new large district? And then we had a kind of similar discussion around the potential for the discretionary spending above the foundation formula, how those decisions will be made and what sort of report back mechanisms could be employed for like outcomes related to those supplemental spending needs, it just felt like there's a need for a lot of transparency there to make sure that, within a big district you're tracking, what are those strategic, priorities that your voters are voting on supplemental spending to make happen and make sure those aren't just going to one area of your big district. So yeah, similar theme there. And then just with the, numbers and narratives in general, pointing to the challenge of not having the districts established for doing some of this, present state, future state modeling that we'd want to see on the finance side. So, talking about the value of just like picking an example for modeling rather than, waiting necessarily for next session when they're known for sure. We also talked about the value, like kind of like adding narrative to the numbers of having maybe like a plain language summary of each of the foundation formula strategies, which, I think Secretary Saunders tried to give us at the beginning of this call, actually, in the legislative update, but just thinking that would be really valuable as, stakeholders and, just Vermonters try to digest these, different approaches. That's what I got. Elizabeth.
Thanks, Rebecca. And the last group is the Quality Committee. Someone want to report out on behalf of that committee?
Sure, I will. So there's Zoe and Jay and I, we had some technology issues, so we ultimately had a silent meeting so that we wouldn't have echoes. And we went through our notes from the last meeting were not recorded or didn't get saved. I'm not sure what happened. So we tried to recreate what we talked about last time. Unfortunately, we lacked 2 students that we had last time, which were sorely missed. They were great, but we did our best. So in large measure, we talked about different measures by which we should be taking a look at student success, educator quality that we think leads to student success, and looking at that and not just sort of standardized test format, but holistic measures, looking at social emotional skills, and also looking at different assessments that would take into account grit and persistence, not just at the secondary level, but the elementary school level. So looking more holistically at the entire quality of service or education being delivered to students. And then we also looked at, talked briefly in the notes, we talked a little bit about size of schools, secondary schools versus elementary schools, and how parents want to remain involved at the elementary school level more so than at the secondary level. So at the tug of war there a little bit, but not really tug of war, just acknowledging that parents want to be more involved at the lower grades. And so looking at that and how you deliver education in a smaller school at a elementary school level, but not micro school. That's what we talked about, at least silently, given our challenges.
Thanks, Jeff.
And this time we saved our notes. We're good.
Thanks, everyone. By way of wrapping up, I thought a question came up at the governance meeting that feels worth repeating, which is what are we sharing and in what way in terms of these notes? Obviously the steering group will make this decision as well, but the way I'm operationalizing it is the running notes that each committee is providing do 2 things. One, they inform the more regular report back to the legislature that we are doing. So in addition to me summarizing our full commission conversation, I'll be able to pull some things from these notes to share back in real time. And then the second part, which is more for the steering group to consider, but when the committees get to the end of this process, which is the goal was to have it end around the end of the session, it probably will be useful to generate some sort of written summary, written report. I use that term loosely, but to be able to provide that, because this represents an analysis of policy implications, which I think pulled all together will also be helpful. So that is where these discussions are headed. It is a little hard to pick them up every 2 weeks, but I think that when you look at them together, it is pretty cohesive. And with that, we are at the point in the meeting where there is another opportunity for public comment. So similar to the beginning of the meeting, if there are folks who are interested in addressing the commission, now is the time. We certainly we may not be able to respond in real time, but we'll be able to get back to folks. So I'll ask the folks in the room to monitor any raised hands on that end. And if you are on the virtual side and you would like to speak, please raise your virtual hand. And we'll start with anyone in the physical space, if there is anyone.
Hi, I'm stepping right up to the table. Rebecca Fillion, I'm the principal at the Twin Valley Elementary School here in nearby Wilmington, and I'm also the president of the Vermont Principals Association. I very much appreciate the work of the commission, in particular, the representation from so many different facets of leadership and education in the state. And I think it's a really great testament of our small state that we can work in this way as a collaborative team. And so what I really am hoping is that there is a way the commission can stay active and stay participating in the conversation. I understand, you know, as the meeting started, there was conversation around this work ending in September. It's hard to imagine that the work will be completed at that time. One of the things that I would love to just share today is a frustration with the lack of focus in the field around education quality in this conversation. I think listening to the governor in January, what was exciting was we may be able to see a more affordable Vermont that would also offer our students equity and excellence, no matter what school that they were in. I was super excited to be appointed to the Education and Accountability Sprint team. You may or may not be aware that that team never convened, never met, was never communicated with. In addition to the after school team, the special education team, and the preschool team. The teams that did meet were governance and policy, CTE, and timeline, which for me as an educator set a really clear focus on what I perceived to be what was most important, and not in that conversation was actual learning for our kids. It was really refreshing to listen in on some of the conversations in your committee to hear there are still conversations going on around what is quality education, what data drives those decisions in our schools. And it's really important to me to recognize that that's where the basis of this work should be, not just solely in finance and not just solely in governance, but really firmly grounded in what's best for kids. And that's a whole child, what they need to eat, what mental health supports they need, what school safety is like, in addition to a really sound and quality education. We have some really great tools and mechanisms in Vermont, like the education quality standards, even district quality standards that could be leveraged in some better ways, in my opinion. But in addition to just measuring, we really need to be thinking about the capacity of the Agency of Education to provide supports to schools and making sure that the funding is in place in order to do that. We were really lucky to meet with Zoe on several occasions, the Executive Council of the Vermont Principals Association team, and really talk to her. I think to her surprise, her impression that local control really drove these conversations, and to hear principals say, no, what we want to work together on excellence for our students. We want to work smarter, not harder. We are in full support of an agency that is strong and dedicated to excellence for kids, that can set high standards and put in supports in place to make sure our schools can provide that for all our kids. And I would say all the representation here at the commission would also agree to the same. So what I'm really hoping this commission can move forward is that conversation and that involvement, because the bills that are presented at this time to me have a glaring and obvious absence of strong excellence in education for our youth. So with that, thank you very much for hearing me today.
Thank you.
Thank you. I don't see any online hands, so if there are other folks in the room, you're welcome to come up.
We do.
Great.
Good afternoon to the commission. Thank you for coming down to southern Vermont, pretty far out there. I wanted to provide you some feedback, particularly on what I was listening to Friday as I was sitting in the lounge in the Senate committee, and some of the testimony that I've seen from the AOE on the financing models that we are looking at. My name is Laura Sibilia. I serve in the House, Wyndham 2. I actually graduated from this school along with my 11 siblings graduated from this school. I do not represent this district. I represent an adjacent district. The concern that I'm having about the financing discussions relates to a conversation that many of you know. My community, myself, these communities fought for close to more than a decade around fixing the funding formula, the improper student weights, which resulted in the underfunding of students in this building, in the buildings in the elementary schools surrounding it, and the overtaxing of the citizens supporting this building and the buildings around it. And so folks here have paid very, very close attention to the work to fix that for me. And I am alarmed by some of the discussion that I heard in Senate Education, by some of the testimony that's been offered by the Agency of Education. We know that the incorrect weights that harmed students here and taxpayers here, that there was a lack of empirical evidence for many of them, that they were not updated regularly. And I'm alarmed to see the Senate and the agency suggesting slight tweaks here, slight tweaks there, perhaps this piece and that piece, which is exactly how we ended up with the situation that harmed so many students here. So I would ask the commission to pay special attention to that. I would also note that the model referenced by the Agency of Education, and particularly the modified evidence-based model, has not been subjected to significant due diligence by the legislature. I want to add a comment about politics and urge you all to keep this commission going. I think it is imperative. I voted for the House bill that came out because I thought it was broad enough and provided enough opportunity for us to work together and collaboratively over a number of years to strengthen our public education system. And you all are a key part of it. And so I think it's imperative that you stay. I think having this commission cease in the fall really just takes us in a different direction than the one envisioned by the governor at the beginning of the session and the House bill. I would also say, I think it's really important to make sure that with the State Board of Education, that the legislature has a hand in appointing some of those members. We have seen a pretty significant political activity around our education systems in the last 8 years. And I think that that's normal and natural. When you are leading a system and you're in charge, you get to move it the way you want. I think we need to have more dynamic tension and balance in the accountability and oversight of those systems. And so I would encourage you to weigh in about making sure that the legislature and or maybe other, the other branch of government helps to appoint members to the state board. And finally, with the Senate bill, I would note for you all, I think it's imperative that you think about tuition policy and the bill that came out of the House. This district is surrounded by 6 choice towns, which represents about 100 to 150 students that could be in this building. The students, I understand from some of those surrounding towns that come here for sure are students with IEPs. It does not mean that students without IEPs don't come here, that none of them come here, but those students for sure do come here. I would also note, for the record, you know, the district that I represent, which represents some of those choice towns, I've supported their situation for years and years. The Carson decision changed that calculus. And I think that it's time that Vermont gets very serious about this issue. We have a constitutional problem. I will also say, and I think it's important to say, that there is an important place for our traditional academies, I think, in the education of Vermont students. But I will say that the voices from Burnburton and St. Johnsbury are overrepresented in these conversations. And you need to be cognizant of that. They're important voices, but they are occupying many of the highest seats. And it's important to recognize that, address it, and continue to move forward with ensuring we have a strong public education system for all of our students. Thank you.
Thanks, Laura. All right, we have time for probably one more. Someone in the room, if there is anyone? No? Okay. Again, very sorry that I am not there in person. Appreciate folks hosting us. And with that, we are actually, I'll just really quick, our next meeting is May 19th. That's our fully virtual meeting from that's in the morning. And then our next in-person meeting is in the Hartford School District on June 2nd. And with that, I will adjourn. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah, I didn't know that.